Hello and welcome. We are talking about lifestyle modifications for brain health with Dr. Rudy Tanzi. And I am particularly excited about this topic as familial Alzheimer's disease runs in my family. And I often find myself sitting at the edge of my seat, listening to latest podcasts and interviews in the field of Alzheimer's disease. I try to better understand the disease and what I can do to mitigate the onset. However, it's challenging. But the question I keep coming back to is how much of what is recommended for late onset Alzheimer's disease pertain to those who carry the genes for familial Alzheimer's disease? Gene carriers are less than 1% of the Alzheimer's population, and their participation in research is invaluable. Since the population is small, they are not always understood or represented when we talk about some of the studies and theories about what we can do to help mitigate the onset. So I'm delighted that Dr. Tanzi is able to speak with us on the topic. And he is one of the true leaders in the field of Alzheimer's disease. He will speak to his experience in the field for over 40 years and help guide us on possible lifestyle modifications that make sense for gene carriers. Along with being a pioneer in the field, Dr. Tanzi has so many distinctions and accomplishments. And most exciting, of course, in relation to our community is that he was involved in discovering all three of the genes that play a role in familial Alzheimer's disease, which are APP, presenilin-1, and presenilin-2. He works at MassGeneral Hospital as the director of the Genetics and Aging Research Unit, the director of the Henry and Allison McCance Center for Brain Health, is the co-director of the MassGeneral Institute for Neurodegenerative Disease, and at Harvard Medical School, he holds the position of Joseph and Rose Kennedy Professor of Neurology. Some fun facts about Dr. Tanzi is that he is Harvard University's top 100 most influential alumni, Time Magazine list of most 100 influential people in the world, and he is the receiver of one of our nation's most prestigious awards, the Smithsonian Ingenuity Award, given for his creation of Alzheimer's in a Dish. He is New York Times bestseller on some of the books like Super Genes, Super Brain, and The Healing Self. And he is also a musician and pianist and played multiple times with Joe Perry and Aerosmith. Dr. Tanzi, it is an absolute privilege to have you on the Young Timers Workshop on lifestyle modifications today.
Great to be here, and I hope I can answer some questions and provide some information both about lifestyle and also some of the exciting new medicines in the pipeline too that pertain to specifically to the folks in young timers as well.
Thanks. So to start us off, would you mind just giving a little bit of your background and work in Alzheimer's as it pertains to our community?
Well, I started, so back in the early 80s, I was lucky enough, I was 20 years old and my mentor was 25 years old, and we did the first study ever to find a disease gene using genetics. We found the gene for Huntington's disease, which is a movement disorder. And it was around 1982 that I did my first genetic study of Alzheimer's disease, back when people didn't even know if there was an Alzheimer's disease gene. And following through on that, that led to discovering the amyloid gene, as I named it, APP gene. I was a student then at Harvard Medical School. And then worked with Peter Hislop to find the presenilin-1 gene, and then we found presenilin-2. And so I've worked on those genes my whole life, my whole career, trying to understand how they cause the disease. And I'm very excited right now because I've been working on a drug for over 20 years that literally reverses the effects of the mutations in all three of those early onset genes. So my late colleague, Steve Wagner, and I discovered how those mutations, whether in APP or the presenilins, cause the disease. And I'd like to explain it because I think I can do this in a simple way, and I'd like to use a pen to do that, if you can see me. So if this is APP and that gold band is A beta in the middle, first APP gets clipped by beta secretase, and then this piece goes off and does something. And now this piece is left in the membrane. And then the second enzyme, gamma secretase, which is made by the presenilin genes, right? So this is the APP gene makes APP, the presenilin genes make gamma secretase. It comes in like a Pac-Man and it has to clip here. And the mutations in presenilins close the mouth. And when the mouth is closed and it can't get in as far, you make more of the longer A beta that drives amyloid, A beta 42. And if gamma secretase, if the gamma secretase is okay, but the mutations are in APP, then it's kinked and it can't fit in. The mouth is fine, but it can't fit in as well. And again, because you're not getting this into the mouth as well, you make more A beta 42, the long A beta that drives amyloid. So what Steve Wagner and I did starting 20 or so years ago was, kind of go to the doctor and they say open your mouth. We just said, open your mouth. We just found drugs that would open the mouth of gamma secretase. And the idea was if you open the mouth, whether you have mutations in presenilins or APP, a more open mouth gets this inside further. And then instead of making the A beta 42 that drives amyloid, you actually make the shorter A beta 38 that prevents amyloid. So it took 20 something years to get here. And now I'm excited to say that we hope to start our first clinical trial. You have to start with safety, our first phase 1 clinical trial this year. And we're going to push as fast as we can. If this drug works the way we know it works and it's safe, this would be a drug that as soon as you know you have one of these mutations, as early as possible in life, you take this drug, and by opening the mouth, you reverse the mutations, whether they're in APP or the presenilins. So my whole life work has led to this. This is what I've been, from 1982. And I'm just so excited and just hoping that everything goes well and that we can deliver a drug that will, especially for generations to come, you find out you have one of these mutations and you take this drug to reverse it. And that's what what most excites me these days. And in addition to the work on brain health and what we can do with lifestyle, to offset risk, as early as possible in life. But I'm happy to answer questions about the drug and that first part of it. I just wanted to, if there's any group to share this with, it's you, because it's you all and the families like yours that drove me to do this, so yeah.
When you're talking, I feel my eyes well up that there are people like you out there doing the work that you're doing. I can't even put into words what it means to us that you are doing this work. So thank you. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about this. So just to organize ourselves, I'd like to hold the questions and come back to it in a little bit, just so we can go through some of the more lifestyle modifications. So if it's okay, let's just move through some of these general questions. The first one here is, what are the lifestyle modifications suggested for late onset Alzheimer's disease? And can you offer some that would make sense for the familial Alzheimer's disease community?
They're really the same suggestions, but, amyloid drives this disease. Okay. So actually it was Randy Bateman at Diane who at a recent meeting said a very simple statement. The faster you make amyloid in your brain, the sooner you get Alzheimer's. We all make amyloid in our brains. Unfortunately, there are mutations that cause you to make amyloid faster. The early onset mutations, you produce more of this longer A beta 42 for the reason I just described. If you have an ApoE4 variant, it's not the tap is turned on too high, it's the drain is clogged. You're not getting it out. I like to think about the brain like a kitchen sink. and the amyloid's filling it up. And in most cases, the drain just isn't good enough. It's the ApoE4 variant. But in the rare cases, 1 or 2% of cases, it's the tap is turned on too high with A beta 42. So if the tap is turned on high, you got to, basically it's the same recommendations, but early onset gene mutation carriers have to be much more vigilant, diligent, and do this sooner, okay? So there's two categories of what we talk about you have to, need to do to offset risk or to slow down the buildup of amyloid and the ensuing pathology after amyloid, the tangles and the inflammation. One of them just has to do with just general health, right? Your blood pressure, making sure your blood pressure is okay, and taking, whatever measures you need to bring your blood pressure to normal, because you don't want that extra neurovascular insult. Diabetes can cause neurovascular effects, so checking your A1C and making sure you don't have that comorbidity. And along the same lines, checking your cholesterol, making sure particularly you're keeping your LDL, I would say under 80. Most people say 100. I under 80 is, I have a mutation myself such that my dad and his brother and my dad's dad all died by 45. And it's a mutation that gives you high, what's called Lp(a), lipoprotein A. It's like the glue by which LDL binds to arteries and makes plaque. And so I have to keep my LDL, because of my genetics, under 40. So I keep my LDL at 39. It's like you do what you got to do. Hopefully, with our new drug, the gamma secretase modulator, you find out you have a mutation in APP or presenilin, and you say, okay, you got to take this drug, just like I got to take drugs to keep my LDL down. But even for Alzheimer's, you do want to keep your cholesterol down, so you don't have that extra added, risk of neurovascular disease. And then in terms of just general suggestions, so I wrote this book. The third book I wrote in a trilogy with Deepak Chopra was The Healing Self. That was after Super Genes and Superbrain. And at the end of the book, there's an action plan for what to do in your life to minimize inflammation and to maximize the clearance of amyloid in your brain. And after we wrote the book, I came up with an acronym to summarize that action plan. And I came up with the acronym SHIELD. So are you familiar with SHIELD? The acronym SHIELD?
A little bit, but
Yeah.
if you could go
Okay,
into
so
more.
let me go in. So SHIELD stands for sleep. S is sleep. H is handle stress. I, interaction. E, exercise. L, learn new things. And D, diet. And I think it's worth just going through each one a little bit, if it's okay. Sleep is when you clear amyloid from your brain naturally. So at night when you sleep, if some of you have like a Fitbit, and you're going in and out of dreams, REM and deep sleep, every time you have a cycle from dreams to deep sleep, I call it a rinse cycle for the brain. You actually clear amyloid. You actually get these cells in the brain called microglia and astrocytes, glial cells, to get rid of amyloid and flush it out. So the more of those cycles you have, the more you're rinsing amyloid out of your brain, is the way to think about it. And some people say, oh, I can't sleep 7 to 8 hours like we recommend. And I say, look, even if you have a power nap during the day and you have a little bit of dreaming, maybe you drool on your desk a little bit, that's one cycle. That's still a cycle. And if you get try to get 3 or 4 of those cycles in, that's great for clearing amyloid. So that's sleep. H is handling stress. And so here it's talking, it's just basically, trying to be more mindful and dealing with stressful situations. But, meditation practice, right? And, meditation is nothing special. Just, I like to say, if you're meditating, you're doing it right. When people ask how to meditate, if you're sitting down, closing your eyes, and as things enter your brain, like thoughts, words, emotions and feelings, or sensations, like a breeze is hitting you or mosquitoes bugging in your ear, basically, as your brain is bringing you what it does, sensations, imagination, feelings, thoughts, your eyes are closed and just gently just swipe them away with your mind. Just say, you know, you don't do it forcefully. You just gently let things dissipate that are coming through your mind from your brain. And that's meditating. And the reason why that's so important is this. I don't know how many of you know this, but there's a pathway in the brain called the default mode network. Default mode network. It makes you you. It's if you didn't have, when it's on, your face looks like you. If you're in deep sleep, it's off, and you don't look like you anymore in deep sleep. Have somebody take a picture of you when you're in deep sleep. So the default mode network, it turns out, if you follow that pathway in the brain, it's exactly where Alzheimer's pathology propagates. The amyloid starts there, it tangles everything. That's why it robs us of ourselves, if it goes too far. So the default mode network, what you want to do is turn it off. Because as it fires, it turns out amyloid beta, is made by the nerve cells in the default mode network deliberately, because as the nerve cell fires, the amyloid beta actually is a check and balance, so it doesn't fire too much, right? Neuron has to fire, then turn off. If it keeps firing, you have a seizure. So the amyloid beta has a normal role, has two normal roles. One of them is to restrain the firing of nerve cells so they don't go too far, particularly in the default mode network. So the more time you spend meditating or being mindful or task-driven rather than idle, the better it is for your brain. You don't want that default mode network. So anytime you're agonizing about the past, you're worrying about the future, you're on a plane thinking about what you like or don't like about the food or the flight attendant or the people around you. Anytime you're you, having opinions, right? That default mode network is on. And your goal is to turn it off as often as you can during the day. Meditating, doing a hobby, a task, just being mindful. I mean, I know that, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's so important. I'm going to write my next book I'm writing on Shield. There's going to be probably going to be a whole chapter or 2 chapters on this, because this is so important. So that's handling stress. I is interaction, staying interactive with others. Loneliness is a risk factor for this disease. The brain likes to be stimulated by other people. It helps create new synapses. At the end of the day, in Alzheimer's disease, you know about plaques and tangles and inflammation, but it's synapse loss. The more synapses you lose, the connections between nerve cells, the faster you go to Alzheimer's disease. So seeing people, that's interaction. And I'll just skip to L for a minute, because learning new things goes along with that. When you learn new things, even just watching a documentary, reading a new book, a new hobby, every time you make new synapses, you not only have synaptic reserve, but you reinforce the synapses already there, because all learning is by association with what you already know. So reinforce your neural network and make more synapses, learning new things, staying interactive with people. So I skipped over E, exercise. Exercise is, we just published a paper where we learned that exercise stimulates enzymes that break down amyloid in your brain. So 20, 30 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be aerobic, just get blood flow going. When you exercise and blood flow is increased, your heart rate's increased, it actually gets the muscle that's where you're exercising to release a hormone that goes into the brain and turns on enzymes to break down amyloid. And we figured out the whole pathway. We just published a paper in the journal Neurology a few months ago. Exercise also induces the birth of new nerve cells in the part of the brain that's most vulnerable in Alzheimer's disease. So you're getting new nerve cells born with exercise. So that's E. I did L. Now D, diet. Diet is so big. So the key with diet is to feed your gut microbiome. Okay, so you have trillions of bacteria in your gut microbiome, thousands of strains of bacteria. And we have shown that when those bacteria are healthy and balanced, they drive the clearance of amyloid in your brain. Remember, the goal here is to get rid of amyloid. Whether it's sleep or exercise or diet, you want to drive the clearance of amyloid from your brain because you were born with a mutation that turns the tap on too high. So how do you keep your gut bacteria happy? It's very simple. Plant-based diet. They love fiber. They love crunchy things that are not potato chips and candy and fried foods. Crunchy things like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains. If it's crunchy, but it's not fat, sugar, or salt and processed, those bacteria are happy, and they literally drive the clearance of amyloid from your brain. We published several papers on this. We just published the newest one about a week ago, showing this is particularly true in female mice versus the male mice. It really helps the female mice where they're transgenic for the Alzheimer's genes. And I just want to say one last thing. We just did a lifestyle intervention trial with Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish is famous for the heart diet, for keeping the heart healthy. And in this lifestyle intervention trial, we delivered to the trial, to the subjects in the trial, minimally processed plant-based diets, high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, just like I said, legumes, soy products, seeds, nuts, very low in fats, sweeteners, refined carbohydrates. And in addition, we had them meditate, we've had them exercise, we monitored their sleep. Well, the paper is being written right now, but and I hope it's real because it's amazing. But in this trial, which was only 20 weeks and 50 people, we achieved the same effects on amyloid removal as the recently approved Alzheimer's drug, Leqembi. To me, it's almost too good to be true. But the key here was these diets that were high in plant-based diets, fiber, like I just explained, were delivered to them every day, three meals a day. And I think that was the main thing that helped. So I would say of all of these, the most important ones are diet and sleep. Okay, I just said a lot, so I'll stop there and see what you think.
Yeah, it all sounds good. In fact, some of the questions that had come in, you just touched upon half of them. So I think we're all thinking this along the same lines here, and I'm so glad that you have touched upon them. One that came in was just in reference to diet and gut health. What's the thought about like gluten-free diet and dairy? And sometimes there's a lot of talk about gluten-free and having that having an issue with your health in your gut. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, gluten-free is more for digestive health and, minimizing inflammation in your gut, at least in our hands, we don't have evidence that would help in Alzheimer's disease, a gluten-free diet. In fact, to be honest, we're writing this paper up now. We took Alzheimer's mice and we gave them irritable bowel disease. Okay. So there's ways to make them get leaky gut syndrome, thinking it would make them worse. And somehow it made them better, which is so weird. They cleared more amyloid in their brain when they had leaky gut. So it's the opposite of what we predicted. We're still trying to figure it out. It seems that with the leaky gut, what we think happened was when the immune system is ramped up, like when you have a vaccine, you probably all heard that every vaccine out there has been protective for Alzheimer's disease, right? Flu, pneumonia, shingles, COVID. It doesn't matter what the vaccine is. There's data upon data that say vaccines are protective. We think it's because every time you ramp up the immune system, regardless of what the vaccination is, when the vaccine is given and the immune system's ramped up, there's a cell in the blood called a monocyte that enter the brain and they eat up amyloid. There's actually a trial from a doc at Brigham where he's using a bacterial wall gemisch that he injects to get the immune system ramped up. So monocytes from the blood will enter the brain and help clear the amyloid and eat it. And I think that's what vaccines are doing to protect against Alzheimer's risk as well. And I just got done with a scientific advisory board meeting for 3 hours where they're developing the adjuvant that's used for a vaccine, the aluminum adjuvant. They're using that to trigger the immune system to get monocytes into the brain to eat amyloid. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think gluten-free is going to help with Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
Of course, with cholesterol and dairy, high dairy is going to give high cholesterol, and I already mentioned that cholesterol can make things worse.
And then what about intermittent fasting? That comes up a lot in talking about brain health.
Now, intermittent fasting is different. I think with intermittent fasting, you actually help the mitochondria. Like we're learning. So I'll just tell you that we invented Alzheimer's in a dish, right? It's the first mini human brain organoid, like that big. What takes 30 years in a patient from pathology to symptoms and Alzheimer's, we get to happen in 6 weeks in a mini brain that big. And we tested every known drug, every natural product we could find to say what stops the pathology, plaques, tangles, inflammation. And the drugs and natural products that came up the most, what they had in common was that they helped mitochondrial health. The mitochondria are the batteries of the cells. And with age and with amyloid as well, the health of the mitochondria go down. So with the intermittent fasting, it actually induces the clearance of bad mitochondria. So it's like taking out the dead batteries so the cell can make new batteries that are good. You're activating something called autophagy. And in this case, if you have autophagy or the breakdown, autophagy means breakdown. Mitophagy is autophagy of mitochondria. You're breaking down mitochondria, meaning you're getting rid of the bad ones. It's like a toy with 8 batteries and 3 of them are getting weak. And you can't put new batteries in until you take the old ones out. That's what intermittent fasting does, is it gets rid of the bad mitochondria so you can replenish with good ones. So I do it. I practice intermittent fasting 3 times a week.
And
so 3 times a week, after dinner, I stop eating until I'm extreme. I don't eat until dinner the next day. And then in the middle of the day, I might have like a handful of pumpkin seeds or something just so I have some energy. So I think it's huge. I think intermittent fasting is a very good idea.
That's good. I hear often different companies like Prolong advertising like intermittent fasting type things, and it's good to hear that there's research and benefit on it because it's very challenging to do.
Well, I know, I get lots of emails from people taking care of patients. And I get a lot of emails from people who have their loved ones on, ketogenic diet or ketogenic. Like I think a lot of people use this KE4. It's a very foul tasting ketone drink. I tried it. I couldn't get it down. But I guess they mix it with other juices and stuff. But that's also part of it, is the ketogenic diet that's induced. Ketones are induced by fasting, and the ketones help get this process going that I was just describing. So some people just take the ketones. I'm not saying you should. I don't know if that works, but there are a lot of people taking ketone products like KE4 and et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's move on to supplements because that's always a big question too. People are always wanting to know omega-3, D, and things like that. What are your thoughts?
So I'm very careful here because, without clinical evidence, I'm not supposed to recommend anything, right? Like the extreme is, on TV, the jellyfish protein. My God. They have so many lawyers, I don't even want to say anything in a public forum about them because they'll sue me, but I'll just leave it at that. So there's a lot of brain health anti-Alzheimer's snake oil out there. Most of it is total BS. Most of it. Okay. But I would say that there are some out there that at least have the right ingredients and I'll tell you why I think they're right. But the problem with the ones out there with the right ingredients is they try to pack so many ingredients in one capsule, has 25 different ingredients. Well, you don't have enough of any one of them to do anything. Dose matters, right? So I would say there's really the only ones out there, and I'm going to say, so I give out a list of what I think are helpful supplements with a disclaimer this long that says, this is only based on research in my lab. These are supplements that were suggested by natural products that worked in our Alzheimer's in a dish mini brain model. I don't have clinical evidence yet. At the McCance Center, we're starting clinical trials and combinations of these natural products. But without clinical evidence, I just want to make that disclaimer first, very emphatically. So I do have a list, and I'm happy to share it with that disclaimer of supplements I take every day. I take 10 different supplements a day myself. I'm 65 years old now. So I've been taking supplements that have come out of my studies for a long time. And I based on what they do in the dish and based on them being safe, I'm like, why not take them? But I don't have clinical evidence yet. I just want to emphasize that again. So I'm happy to share that list, but I'll tell you that most of the natural products on my list or supplements have in common one thing. They increase cellular energy. If you increase the energy in that little microglial cell in the brain, he'll eat more amyloid. If you increase the cellular energy in a nerve cell, when it encounters amyloid, it will be more resilient to forming a tangle, which kills the nerve cell. Energy is it. As we get older, cellular energy goes down. So I take products that increase my cellular energy. And it just so happens that those are the products that in an unbiased diagnostic screen of our Alzheimer's in a dish, those are the ones that stop the pathology. The ones that help mitochondria to be healthier, those are the batteries where you get more energy in the cell. So, I can mention them now. I usually don't mention them when I give a talk because, you don't want to be one of those snake oil guys because you don't have clinical evidence yet. But I do share them with family and friends. I work at the New England Patriots for 9 seasons now. Of course, with Bill Belichick being fired, I'm not sure if I'm going to be brought back for a 10th season. But with them, the whole team has been given access to the supplements that I recommend, and they've been taking them for many seasons. Tom Brady took them to TB12. They use some of them, not all of them. So anyway, I'm happy to share that list, and you can distribute it if you want. But it's all about cellular energy.
Thanks, Rudy. We always have questions about that, and we won't hold you to it too, because we know that our community is quite small, being just 1% of the Alzheimer's population. We know that our cohort has not been studied immensely, and it could be different. But what I do hear you saying is that taking all of these supplements is definitely going to potentially add the benefit of this cellular energy, which helps us in our everyday life, doing more things with our
So if
family.
I send you the list, you can distribute it with the disclaimer on it?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay, so the list is just to let you know this. The list is separated between supplements that we predict will stop inflammation, because neuroinflammation at the end of the day is the big killer of the synapses. Neuroinflammation is what's doing most of the killing of nerve cells and removing synapses. And I like to say that, amyloid is the match. Your mutations light that match. The tangles are the brush fires that match lights. They spread and propagate. And then, but it's not till you get the neuroinflammation that you get enough cell death and synapse loss to get symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So most of the supplements on my list are meant to fight inflammation. And it turns out if you increase cellular energy in microglial cells, they're less likely to become inflammatory. But a couple of the products, natural products on my list, and I'll mention what they are, were found to increase the clearance of amyloid in my dish. So the way you clear amyloid in the dish is you have these little cells called microglia, and they eat the amyloid at night while you sleep. If you have this very gut microbiome healthy diet, plant-based diet, it induces them again, the microglial cells, to eat the amyloid like little Pac-Man. And so the two supplements I take that we found, at least in the dish model, to induce microglial cells to eat up amyloid. And remember, that's what Leqembi does. Leqembi, the new Alzheimer's drug from Eisai, I'm sure you all know Leqembi you all know about Leqembi, right? That got approved, I would imagine, the Leqembi Alzheimer's drug from Eisai. So Leqembi is expensive and it has safety issues. But Leqembi, that's what it does. It's an antibody that goes into the brain, binds the amyloid, then tells these little microglial cells around that amyloid to eat it. So I'm trying to find, because Leqembi is so expensive, and you do have to be monitored to make sure there's no swelling or hemorrhage with MRI. I'm trying to come up with cheaper, safer things that will clear amyloid. And so that was the first screen we did. So the two things that came up, one is called urolithin A. And urolithin A, urolithin, capital A, is made in your gut from ellagic acid. Ellagic acid is high in pomegranates and different fruits. And the gut bacteria take ellagic acid and turn it into urolithin A. So there's companies that sell urolithin A. It's not cheap. But there's a company called MitoPure. And we're trying to do a trial on urolithin A. And I have to say that if the product wasn't so good, I wouldn't buy it from them, because their CEO and the people there are not very nice. We're trying to do a trial and they're not very accommodating. But the fact is, their urolithin A with MitoPure, and it's called, the other name for it is Timeline. And the name of the company is Amazentis, 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 Timeline, MitoPure. That urolithin A is one of the top natural products we found that induces the microglial cells to eat the amyloid. That's one of them. And we're going to do a trial. In fact, we're interacting with them today to try to come to terms to do a trial, and have enough funds today. We're getting close. We're going to do an Alzheimer's trial with it at the McCance Center.
Well,
The second product, yeah.
Funny enough, we have a participant who was asking about that, and he's an endurance athlete, and I'm sure there's several of us who would be interested in being guinea pigs if they needed study participants in that one.
Yeah, they sell it for athletes because it helps with muscle, because it's inducing mitochondrial strength. It makes you grow muscles. Yeah, it's good for your muscles. What we found is it helps clear amyloid. That's what I care about. So that's one. The other one, so we also did a screen. We screened every FDA-approved drug in the dish and said which ones induce clearance of amyloid. And one of them that came up the best actually is over the counter. And it's sold for osteoporosis. It's a soy-based product called ipraflavone. I think R-I, F as in Frank, Lavone, ipraflavone. And we're trying to look at, so we're going to do a trial on that as well. Because ipraflavone and urolithin were the two natural products that are over the counter, they're available in supplements that induced uptake of amyloid the best. Now, with all this said, remember, we haven't done the clinical trials yet, okay? I don't want to be guys who write books like You're Ending Alzheimer's Disease and false hope. I'm not going to be one of those guys. I wanted to say that, we still have to do the clinical trials, but I'm just sharing with you in advance, the two that are most relevant to those mutations in APP and presenilins. You got to clear amyloid because you're making too much.
That's great. I love all the things that are sort of brewing out there. We're here waiting and excited, and we'll be watching for it too. I have one last question that is going to sort of steer off diet and lifestyle, but it's a great question, so I want to ask that. But before I do, I just wanted to talk about a study that's going on at Diane. And the reason why I want to do that is because it's about this topic that we're speaking of today. And it's called the Lifestyle Factor Study. Some of you already know about it, but basically what they are doing is collecting data on our lifestyle. So For example, within my family, there's different ages of onset, but it would be interesting to know what is it about somebody's lifestyle that makes it a different age of onset. And many of you have been around here for a while and may already know about it and have already participated, and that's awesome. If I know that the drug styles get a lot of shining light and these other studies may fall by the wayside. So I'm just sort of shining a light in this moment about diet and lifestyle and our community that Diane, through the expanded registry, is doing this study. And so I will put it in the chat in a second, or Erin, if you're out there, if you want to put in a chat the email address to start participating in this. It's Diane EXR, which is DIANEXR at WUSTLE.edu. And they can connect you with the study. And for some people who might be listening in, I know I have family in England who might be joining later to listen in, and they don't have the time to actually do too much with this research. This is sort of an easier one that you can do on your phone. It's called My Diane, and it's an app, and you can participate. And that research does get put in and analyzed, and I think it's really beneficial and sort of talking about the studies that are ongoing with late onset, but also this is talking about our community. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity to participate, but I just want to shine a light over there that the more we participate in this lifestyle sort of conversation, the more information will get out. So yes, and it is definitely anonymous. It's just collecting information about family and lifestyle factors and ourselves. So on to the next question. That is a small deviation, but it's an interesting one. So I'm going to read the question here. My relatives in my extended family have had an incredible painful decline from early onset Alzheimer's disease, which have been filled with anger and fear. I suspect that for most of them, this stems from trauma and their experiences in their childhood, or later, evidenced in a few cases by people's names that they've muttered or in mid stages, and that as they regress, they find themselves reliving the trauma without the coping mechanisms that they had learned while they were adults. In recent studies, there has been a lot of progress in MDMA-assisted therapy to alleviate trauma. It's safe to say that carrying these FAD genes, we carry trauma. One area of research within the field is on memory reconsolidation and psychedelic-assisted therapy. The idea is that is it possible to rewrite old neural pathways wherein trauma lies and create doable, lasting healing? Do you believe
Wow.
Do you believe that it's possible to create a palatable decline for those with familial Alzheimer's disease by means of healing underlying trauma? And if you need an analogy, in fact, let me give the analogy for some people who might be new to sort of this concept. But to create an analogy, imagine our body and brain are a container, and the memories and experience of our life are the contents of that container, most strongly impacted by our childhood when the brain is at its peak development. As reasonable, healthy adults, we have developed coping mechanisms for pain we feel and effectively put a lid on that container when our feelings became too much. When Alzheimer's disease hits, this lid slowly disintegrates and the contents become overwhelming for the patient and especially for the caretakers. Do you believe that it's possible to change the contents of the container to ease the decline of the patient and consequently the caretakers?
There's many ways to do that. I don't know about using psychedelics to do it. I can't comment on that specific part of it, but certainly memory of trauma is a big cause of stress, right? The two biggest causes of stress are being taken away from what you're used to, right? Suddenly what you're used to is not there. And second is it's recalling memories of pain that can induce fear and phobia and anxiety. So all of that stress is going to cause the disease to accelerate, because with stress comes chemicals in the brain like cortisol that kill nerve cells and cause even more inflammation. That's why handling stress is in a shield. So there are many different ways to deal with how childhood trauma or trauma from early in life is coming back to haunt you. And I can understand how in Alzheimer's, the coping mechanisms are diminished. Yeah, it gets worse. I just, dealing with that, really is a psychiatric issue. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can understand the question. I understand the meaning of it, and I think it's really, really well written question as well. But I think, to me, it could be therapy. It could be, I don't know about meds that will do it. It's just not my specialty. But I agree that with everything that was said there, it makes sense.